Welcome to Hardly. The book is distilled into 3 stories, giving you the key ideas in minutes. Today we study together Joseph Ledoux' book, Anxious, Using the Brain to Understand and Treat Fear and Anxiety, in which we probe into the tangled relationship between fear and anxiety, the surprising role of memory in shaping emotional responses, rethinking traditional therapy through brain-based insights. Joseph Ledoux is the Henry and Lucy Moses Professor of Science at New York University, where he is a member of the Center for Neuroscience and Department of Psychology. Don't go away. Hardly, the editor, will be right back with the story. We're about to journey through 3 stories that vividly explore fear, anxiety, and how the brain, memory, and therapy intertwine in unexpected ways. The first story takes us to a quiet suburban neighborhood where a woman named Lisa lived. Lisa had always been a bit anxious, but nothing unusual, until one afternoon. As she was driving, she encountered a near-miss accident, barely avoiding a collision with another car. After this, her life changed. What seemed like a small event triggered an overwhelming fear of driving. Each time she got into her car, her hands trembled, her heart raced, and she could feel the weight of invisible dread bearing down on her. It wasn't the accident that haunted her, but the lingering fear that something bad would happen again. Lisa's fear began to bleed into other parts of her life, making her feel vulnerable in situations that had once felt safe. It's important to note here how fear and anxiety are closely connected. Lisa's anxiety wasn't just a response to a threat she could see, but to something she imagined. Fear made her freeze at the thought of getting behind the wheel, but anxiety, rooted in a future possibility, not a present danger, kept her frozen. As the book reminds us, fear is the immediate alarm, but anxiety lingers, tethered to what might come, not what is. For Lisa, the solution involved more than just avoiding driving. She needed to challenge the deeper anxiety driving her fear. A cognitive behavioral approach helped her start small, facing her anxiety step by step, until she could take control of the wheel again. From Lisa's story, we see how fear and anxiety are tangled together. The next story shifts us to a different but equally perplexing emotional maze. In the second story, a man named James had always enjoyed hiking. The stillness of nature brought him peace, until one fateful hike when he encountered a snake. Though it wasn't venomous, the shock of the encounter stuck with him. Over time, he developed a paralyzing fear of snakes, but oddly, this fear expanded. Soon, it wasn't just snakes he feared. James began avoiding the outdoors altogether. Even the sight of a coiled garden hose in his backyard sent him into a spiral of panic. What James didn't realize was that his memory was playing tricks on him. His brain had associated that initial shock with anything that resembled a snake, magnifying the threat beyond its real scope. As the book says, memory doesn't just store the past, it reshapes the present and anticipates the future. For James, the sight of a harmless hose triggered the same physiological response as if a snake were in front of him. But through therapy, he learned to gradually rewire his brain. By intentionally exposing himself to images of snakes and practicing calming techniques, James was able to retrain his brain to distinguish between real threats and imagined ones. James's journey reminds us how powerful memory can be in shaping emotional responses. Our next story dives deeper into the concept of control, or rather, the lack of it. Meet Emma, a successful lawyer whose life seemed perfectly in order. Except beneath the surface, she was battling an invisible enemy, panic attacks. They would strike without warning, leaving her gasping for breath, her heart racing as if she were in imminent danger. One morning, as Emma prepared for a major court case, she felt the familiar pangs of anxiety creeping in. But this time, they overwhelmed her. She could barely leave the house, gripped by the fear that she might collapse in the middle of the courtroom. Emma's therapist helped her uncover a core issue: control. Her brain had wired itself to react defensively, and these panic attacks were its way of responding to perceived threats. As Emma worked through therapy, she learned that control wasn't about preventing the attacks, but about changing how she responded to them. By allowing herself to experience the fear without judgment, she diminished its power. Anxiety feeds on avoidance, but fades with exposure, the book suggests. Emma found relief not in resisting the panic, but in learning to let it wash over her and move on. What ties these three stories together is the intricate dance between fear, memory, and the desire for control. Lisa's fear of driving, James's snake phobia turned generalized fear, and Emma's battle with panic attacks all stem from the same core mechanism: the brain's misinterpretation of threat. Each learned that confronting their anxieties, whether through small behavioral steps or through altering their perception of control, could change the wiring in their brains. In a broader sense, these stories reveal how anxiety is both personal and universal. It's not just about an isolated event, but the ripple effects it can cause. One moment of fear can echo in the brain long after the initial threat is gone, distorting memory, amplifying anxiety, and leaving individuals trapped in a loop of avoidance and dread. But the brain, as these stories show, is also remarkably adaptable. The ability to reframe, rewire, and reshape these fear-driven responses provides hope for anyone struggling with anxiety. As the editor of Hardly, through learning these, we can embrace the future with the knowledge that our anxieties, while powerful, are not unchangeable. Our brains, much like the stories we tell, are capable of rewriting old narratives. Each story comes from the most representative real-life cases selected by the Hardly team from this book. There are 8 more stories within the book that are equally worth reading. If you wish to dive deeper, we recommend purchasing the full book. Finally, share a sentence from the book to end today's reading. The conscious feeling of fear is the last step in a long chain of non-conscious processes. The intricate connection between fear, anxiety, and memory, as well as the potential of brain-based therapy, are central themes in this exploration. These stories unravel the complexities of how we experience emotions, but they also shed light on the hope for overcoming these challenges. One final story that stands out involves a young woman named Sophie who struggled with social anxiety. She dreaded public speaking, and even casual social interactions left her overwhelmed. During a group meeting at work, her fear peaked when she was unexpectedly asked to present. Her voice shook, and her hands trembled as she stumbled through her presentation. This experience seemed to confirm her deepest fear, that she wasn't capable. But what she didn't realize was how deeply her brain had linked social situations with danger, amplifying her anxiety each time. Through exposure therapy, Sophie started with small steps, practicing speaking in front of a mirror, then to a close friend, and eventually to small groups. Over time, her brain began to reframe public speaking as less of a threat, and her confidence grew. Sophie's story emphasizes how the brain's wiring can be reshaped, just as we saw with Lisa, James, and Emma. Memory and fear may twist our perceptions, but with the right approaches, those tangles can be unraveled. These tales remind us of the brain's malleability, its capacity to heal from past experiences, and how we can take small steps toward control and understanding. Each of these stories not only provides insight, but encourages us to reconsider how we can face our own anxieties, step by step, just like Sophie.